Hey, you. Bravo's now in Canada.
I just got chills.
If you know Bravo,
I love that. You love that?
you know Vanderpump Rules,
Why does it have to get so complicated?
Summer House,
Don't activate me because you've not seen me activated.
Below Deck,
I'm not your friend. I'm your captain.
Top Chef,
Hi, Chef.
and Housewives. Definitely Housewives.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to this.
Bravo, now available.
It's insane.
Subscribe now with your TV service provider.
Fall in Canada has never been hotter.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
You may have seen this week that the Bank of Canada cut interest rates for the third time in a row. Meanwhile, our team has been hard at work on a new season of In This Economy. And one of the things we're going to be trying to do this season is give you some bonus episodes. Specifically, quick, bite-sized bonus episodes in which our business experts break down big economic news like, say, an interest rate cut, and talk about how it happens, how the concept works, and most importantly, what it means for you now and as you plan your finances down the road. So right after, literally right after, the Bank of Canada cut interest rates, I grabbed City News senior business editor Mike Eppel, and I dragged him into a studio to sit down with me and break it all down. This is a test episode that we're sharing with you because we want your feedback as we make this season. We want to know if you like it, if you don't need that format, if you think it should be shorter, if you think it should be longer, if you want it to have all sorts of bells and whistles, or if you like the idea of really quick, hard-hitting conversations about what's just happened to your money. So have a listen and let us know what you think. Here is Today in This Economy, starring Mike Eppel. Welcome to Today in This Economy, where we examine breaking economic news stories, as always, not by myself, fortunately, but with the help of some of our business experts. Joined today by 680 All News Radio's senior business editor, veteran business journalist, Mike Eppel. Did I say veteran the wrong way?
Yeah, it's okay. You're aging me a little bit, but that's all right.
Listen, today brought news of a third straight interest rate cut by the Bank of Canada. Were people expecting a cut right now?
Yes. The only real question was, would they go maybe 50 basis points as opposed to just 25? But if they went 50, that would kind of imply panic. And we're not at that stage right quite yet, even though you could make the argument that the economy under the surface is doing much worse than what the headlines are indicating. But we haven't seen even one interest rate reduction from the U.S. Central Bank in this cycle. That'll happen later this month. So they kind of have to wait for that to not have too much differentiation in policy with the U.S., although they'll say, we're independent, we don't take our cues from what's happening in the States. At the end of the day, though, they're just kind of going slow and steady. And Tiff Macklem, the Bank of Canada governor, basically said they're data dependent. The next meeting is mid to late October. We'll have a couple more unemployment statistics between then, GDP, all these other things. You could see the economy slow, and they're going to keep cutting rates for successive meetings.
When we covered the first interest rate cut in a long time in June on this show, it was thought at the time that they may not cut it even a second time in July. And, you know, certainly I think at that point, nobody saw them cutting it 3 times in a row. What changed?
The data. It really points to a slowdown in the growth rate of the overall economic output. At the same time, inflation has cooled for 7 consecutive months. You know, things aren't getting cheaper, but right. the cost of things aren't going up anywhere near what they did. You know, we're still at an inflation rate of about 2.5%. A lot of that has to do with housing prices and rental costs. You take that out, and you've got an inflation rate actually below 2% right now. So there was no reason. A lot of economists would argue they were actually maybe too slow in cutting rates again because it takes a year, 18 months for rate relief or rate increases to actually have an effect. So you kind of have to be ahead of the curve. So the fact they've cut 3 in a row, and likely more so, indicates that, yeah, they see it coming down the highway here, that, you know, they have to be getting it down to a so-called neutral rating, a neutral rate, which is around 3%, maybe as low as 2.5%. The overnight lending rate right now is still at 4.25%. So over the next 6 to 9 months, you could see, much more steady interest rate relief. And again, but it takes time for that to actually feel the effects on consumers and households.
If it takes time for them to feel the effect, and there's, I guess, two ways that I want to ask about people feeling it. And the first is, what will be the impact of these 3 rate cuts? So of the rate being where it is now, and where will people feel that? But also overall in the big picture, to your point already indicating that more cuts are to come, perhaps even a 0.5 percentage point. What does that tell us about what the economy is going to be like for Canadians heading into next year?
First of all, tomorrow immediately, and actually later this afternoon, the banks will cut their prime lending rate.
Right.
And they should go 0.25%, so that'll have an effect.
Right after I renewed my mortgage.
Exactly, unless you're on a variable. And as of tomorrow, those will come down by 0.25%. Now, again, you're talking about the prime rate will come down today from 6.7 down to 6.45, which is still pretty high. Mm-hmm. And then there's probably a little on top of that for HELOC interest rates. Car loans will come down too. Again, if they're tied to the prime. If you're fixed, the fixed rate doesn't affect anything. And you always hear this, interest rates on credit cards will start to come down. I have yet to see that.
Really?
Those are always the last thing to move. Huh. Those take forever. And still, you're paying 20 to 22 to 25% on a credit card. 0.25% here and there really doesn't make that much difference.
Right.
So that's the immediate effect. I think more from a psychological or just a feel-good standpoint, a lot of the talk from just when we were leading up to this rate announcement this morning, the sort of the person on the street interview, it's like everybody was saying, gotta cut rates. I can't afford, life. And when you've got borrowing costs, that's just another thing that's just hanging over households. I mean, this just is crunched budgets. Prices went up. At the same time, the amount of money the cost of borrowing went up. It was just this perfect storm of effects on household budgets. And I think just the idea, the fact they're cutting rates, it eases up a little of the pressure, even though, it takes forever to see it. But at least you feel it, I suppose, more from a psychological standpoint, if nothing else. And I will say, just about your question about, what it tells you about the state of the economy. The fact that you look at the latest economic growth report for the second quarter. It showed a 2.1% growth rate for the economy overall. That's okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Except that is a mirage. 2 reasons. The growth in the second quarter was all government largesse, spending. The size of government grew. So that, I think, was up 6.7 or 6.8%. So that's a big contributor to economic growth. The government's the largest employer in the country.
Right.
You have to keep that in mind. At the same time, the population growth has masked what's going on in the underlying economy. Retail spending per person is down. That is down. But you look at the retail sales numbers as a total, they're up because the population has grown by 1 million people. You add that to the mix. Even though you're not spending as much, the numbers just generally go up. So if you factor that out, you've got an economy that's not really doing well at all right now. And that's and they talked about that. The fact they're pulling back on the temporary foreign workers program. That's something they're going to have to start to equate. That's going to all have an effect on where the economy and what policy does in response.
Inflation has slowed. Those prices are never coming down again, right?
It seems, well, again, their target, they want steady inflation of 2% year over year.
Right.
And I've always thought, inflation is this, I don't want to call it evil necessarily, but at the same time, it just means things get more expensive over time.
Which they always have.
Now, can you work against that? Sure, there are times... we are starting to see it a little bit more at the grocery store level where certain items are on sale. That's when you buy in bulk kind of thing, and you can kind of balance your budget just from a day-to-day standpoint. Car prices are going to start to come down a little bit. They're going to have to move some products, so there might be some deals there. Housing is probably always going to get more expensive, it seems, but the borrowing costs will kind of balance that out too. So, yeah, it's one of these things. It's this cycle. You just want it where, okay, we can deal with 2%. You can't deal with 8% inflation. That's just because, well, what's happened just in the past 2 years? We've had nationwide strikes. You know, people have been saying, I need more money to offset that. And that's where you get the strain in the system and everything that's going on right now. So if you can get it down to 2%, that's kind of that's best case scenario. It's not perfect, but it's not a bad benchmark either.
Thank you for all of this, and thank you for the context. The very last thing I want to ask you, and I'm not asking you necessarily to predict the future. I also have a feeling I'll be asking a lot of people this over successive rate cuts. But if you're looking at a car loan or a mortgage right now, are you going fixed or variable?
It depends on your time horizon. I mean, the 2-year rates are coming down, and they're a little bit more affordable, and the variables are still above the fixed. So it depends. The trend is your friend for variable rates.
Right.
So I wouldn't, if you can ride it out, over the course of the next year, they're probably going to equate. I hate saying one way or the other. It really depends on if you're used to just being able to ride things out. It's a lot better than it's going up.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd rather be coming down.
If you've made it this far, paying a variable, then you can probably make it the rest of the way.
Historically speaking, variables are said to be a better deal than a fixed cost mortgage.
There you go, Senior Business Editor Mike Epple. Thank you for this. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
That was, as I said off the top, a test episode for a concept we're using for our new season of In This Economy. We shared it with you, as raw as it is, because we'd really love to hear your feedback, whether you liked it, hated it, were indifferent to it, or if you have suggestions of other formats that you might find useful. You can, as always, find us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or by calling us at 416-935-5935 and leaving a voicemail. Thanks again. As always, we really value what you think we should be doing with our podcasts.
Hey you, Bravo's now in Canada.
I just got chills.
If you know Bravo,
I love that. You love that?
you know Vanderpump Rules,
Why does it have to get so complicated?
Summer House,
Don't activate me because you've not seen me activated.
Below Deck,
I'm not your friend. I'm your captain.
Top Chef,
Hi, Chef.
and Housewives. Definitely Housewives.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to this.
Bravo, now available.
It's insane.
Subscribe now with your TV service provider.
Fall in Canada has never been hotter.